Good. So this is called road trip. Here's how it works. Oh, there's nothing like a road trip. The wind in your hair, the open road, your best friend getting car sick and barfing on your lap. So pile in and work together to answer the following road trip trivia. Though I don't think we're working together. I think this is a competition, right?
I think so.
So how to play. It's multiple choice. We're going to keep track of points. And what works best for that, Pastor Lois? People keep track of their own?
Yep, they got to keep track of their own.
We like that.
That's how it is.
And then winner, you get all of our praise and glory. Okay, and here's an example. What state would you be in if you had traveled to the Grand Canyon? New Mexico, Delaware, or Arizona? Put your answer in the chat. And I can't see the chat, so that's great. And the answer is Arizona. Who got it? Oh, most of you did. Okay, great. See, this is easy. Here we go. Number one, if you drove from Times Square in New York City to the Hollywood sign in LA without stopping, how long would it take? 31 hours, 48 minutes, 42 hours.
Like
second one?
No, this is like the Cannonball Run.
Is that it?
There seems to be some consensus about B. There it is. How did you actually know that? I've never heard of that before. Okay. 2.
Hey, Corbin Schalifer, are you really in 6th grade and you're just bombing into confirmation because it's great? Or if not, can you change your grade, please? Sorry.
Thank you. If you took a detour to Collinsville, Illinois, you would see the world's largest ketchup bottle, milk bottle, baby's bottle. A, B, or C? Pete says B, A. Seeing a lot of A's. All right. Answer, ketchup bottle. Nice. Has anyone seen that? I have not seen it. All right. If you were in Ashburn, Georgia, you would be in the hometown of the world's largest pickle, peanut, or pancake. A lot of C's. A lot of people are keeping their answers to themselves. It's B, ha, pancake, or peanut, not pancake. I guess that makes sense. Peanuts in Georgia, that's the thing, right?
Yep.
Okay, 4. The world's largest bug, a 58-foot blue termite named Nibbles, is found in what state? Florida, Rhode Island, or Vermont? The giant termite does kind of sound like Florida, doesn't it? Vermont. It is Rhode Island. I don't think anyone said Rhode Island, at least none of the 3 who put their answers in the chat. Okay, next one. 5. The only 4 states you can be in at once are Delaware, Ohio, New York, and New Jersey, Washington, Idaho, Oregon, and California, or Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado. I bet some of you have been to this destination. C, it's the 4 corners, right? It's where it's like 4 square states that butt up against each other, and you can stand in. Actually, you can't stand in all 4. You have to like crawl. You have to like crawl on all 4. If you stopped in Hastings, I have a friend from Hastings, Nebraska. You would be in the birthplace of hip hop, Kool-Aid, or Abraham Lincoln. My Hastings, Nebraska friend never told me this one, so I do not know the answer. Kool-Aid. All right. I would have probably guessed Kool-Aid because like hip hop doesn't sound like Nebraska. And Abraham Lincoln, I'm pretty sure, was born in Kentucky. Wasn't he? I might be wrong about that.
Or Springfield, Illinois. My mother went to high school in Hastings because her high school had only one other child besides herself, her graduating class. So she went to she got to go to Hastings to graduate from high school. So she ended up with 30 people in her high school class as opposed to 2 in the school she started with. Yeah.
Okay, number 7. If you stopped 200 yards south of I-40 west of Amarillo, Texas, you'd be looking at 500 windmills, 3 giant dinosaur replicas, or 10 Cadillacs buried in dirt. What?
That is not easy.
And the answer is Cadillacs buried in dirt. Don't know anything about that. That sort of sounds like a Texas thing. 8. If you got engaged at the Space Needle in Seattle, how long would it take to get to a wedding chapel in Las Vegas? 19 hours, 18 minutes, 24 hours, 45 minutes, 29 hours, 4 minutes. Seattle to Las Vegas. Answer is A. Okay. Oh, I was born a few miles from here. If you made a pit stop in Darwin, Minnesota, you might catch a glimpse of America's largest. Been there a million times. What is it, people?
I don't know. I'm sorry.
Oh, there's a whole like building in downtown. I mean, downtown of 90 people. It's a ball of twine. The world
did not know this.
Darwin, Minnesota. It's worth stopping in.
I guess.
The Peachoid, a water tower that resembles a gigantic peach, can be found in what state? Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina. I'm seeing lots of A's. That would be my guess too. No.
No.
South Carolina.
Wow. It's a trick question.
It is a trick question. Oh, here's a tiebreaker in case we needed one. Where would you be if you stopped in the Mile High City? Denver, San Francisco, Portland, Maine. That doesn't seem like a very good tiebreaker because it feels like everyone would get that one.
Yeah.
Denver, Colorado. Okay. Put how many points you got in the chat window. We're using the Lutheran honor system, so Jackson got, Louisa got 10. Ava got 10. Okay, I'm impressed. Griffin got 11. Well, clearly Griffin wins. Okay, well, that was fun. I'm gonna stop sharing that. Here we go. And I have a separate thing. So we only have one announcement tonight. How many of you have heard that we are talking about renovating our church sanctuary and putting in a new organ? Pastor Lois has heard.
I saw some other hands come up.
Yes, so this is a very exciting thing. We are in the process of raising money to pay for all of it. And we're inviting all of our Sunday school and confirmation classes to be part of it as well. Each class is going to buy one note on the organ. And I'll be able to tell you what your note is in just a moment. Actually, you get 2 different notes because you're 2 different grades. But first, I want to show you this little video. So let me share my screen again and check the boxes. Can you see it? Is it coming through?
Gloria Day Lutheran Church is about to rise. We rise to sing. We rise to welcome. We rise to serve and do justice. We've built a strong foundation. And now, living into the future, we respond to the needs of today. More than ever, we yearn to gather together again. We recognize the importance of singing together, the importance of being a community that welcomes everybody. As we learned this year, the landscape can change overnight. Yet we continue to be called to be creative, to adapt, to be ready, to be committed to justice. Join us as together we rise, O Church.
So, January 10th was the date that we kind of relaunched our fundraising campaign after taking some time off because of COVID. Your note on the organ, let me see if I can find that now. So 7th graders are going to have the G sharp. I think that's middle G sharp. That's this one right here. And 8th graders get the one right above that, the A.
A little dissonance when we play both at the same time.
But here's the thing, it's going to be super fun when the organ is built to have like the 3-year-old 2nd grade gap chord, like a perfect little triad there. Right. So Katie, I think, sent this out to all of you. There's a little form that you can fill out that allows you to say who you are, your grade, and how much you would like to contribute. If you want to give $1 to this campaign, that would be amazing. If you want to give $10, even better. The main thing is that Pastor Bradley and all of us have a goal of 100% participation. So everyone at Gloria Day has a chance to participate in giving something to this project. And that doesn't mean it needs to be a lot. So think on that a little bit and watch for Katie's messages about that. Okay, are we ready to dive into the lesson, Pastor Lois?
I think we are. I think it'd be great.
Okay, let me put my screens here. Okay. Oh, that did not work. Share screen. And it is. I'm having some technical difficulties with my double screen here.
We'll give you a chance. We're patient.
Thank you. Okay, here we go. So, I think you all know that Jesus was a Jewish person, and his ministry, everything that he did, happened in and around Jerusalem and the little land of Israel. And all the people Jesus recruited to be his disciples were also all Jewish people. They were all Jewish. Well, his closest 12 disciples named in the Bible were all Jewish men. However, we also know that it was actually the women who were among Jesus' followers who were the more faithful ones. They were the ones who actually went to the tomb and were the first ones to hear the good news on Easter morning. In some ways, they were the ones that got it when all the men were the clueless ones. But anyway, Jesus and his disciples were all Jewish people. And then when you get to the end of Matthew's gospel, the very last thing Jesus tells his disciples is, therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. In other words, this is no longer, at the end of Matthew's gospel, it's no longer just a Jewish movement. Jesus wants his disciples to bring the message out to the entire world, way beyond just the inner community of Israel and the Jewish people. So the vision that Jesus has for his mission beyond his life and death and resurrection is that there should be no insiders or outsiders, that the gospel is for everyone. Okay, so after the four gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the gospels are the four books of the New Testament, the first four books of the New Testament that tell the story of Jesus's life. But one very cool thing is that the Gospel of Luke has a part 2, and it's the Acts of the Apostles. So the same person or people, community that wrote the Gospel of Luke also wrote the Gospel or the Acts of the Apostles. So if you remember the order of the books of the Bible, it's Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and then Acts. Acts is the story that takes place right after Jesus's life on earth, and after his resurrection and his going up to heaven. And Acts tells the story of the gospel spreading beyond just the inner community of the Jewish people in Israel out to all nations. It's sort of the book that tells the story that fulfills what Jesus said when he says, go and make disciples of all nations. So Acts is the story of how the gospel moves out into the whole world. And there are two really important stories. I mean, there's lots of really great stories in Acts, but there are two really important stories that are central to the book of Acts. The first one is Pentecost, which we actually celebrate every year, usually like in June. We decorate the church red, and we all wear red, and oftentimes you'll see like people, like some of you, come to church wearing red. The reason people wear red and that we decorate everything in red is that Pentecost is a story about, well, this is what Acts says in Acts 2. Divided tongues as of fire appeared among them, and a tongue rested on each of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other languages as the Spirit gave them ability. So the Acts of the Apostles describes like these flames or tongues like coming down on each of the disciples and equipping them to speak in other languages so that they can go and share the story of Jesus with people who speak other languages, non-Jews who live in other parts of the world. Okay, that's the Pentecost story. The second story that's really important is the story, like basically most of the book of Acts is the story of the Apostle Paul and his conversion. So I actually have a little video I want to show you about Paul. Cross your fingers and hope that this works.
The miracle of mercy. Paul. This is Saul. Saul was a Pharisee who hated the followers of Jesus so much that he would hunt them down to be brought to trial in Jerusalem. And he would even seek to murder them. Saul was uttering threats with every breath, and he was eager to kill the Lord's followers. So he went to the high priest. He asked him to write a letter to the Jews in Damascus that would allow him to arrest any Christians he found there. He wanted to bring them, both men and women, back to Jerusalem in chains. Now Saul went on his way, and as he came near Damascus, a light from heaven flashed around him, and he heard a voice that said, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" Saul cried out, "Who are you, Lord?" And the voice said, "I am Jesus. Rise and go into the city, and you will be told what to do." So Saul got up and he opened his eyes, but he couldn't see anything. So the men who were with Saul led him into the city. After 3 days, a man named Ananias came to Saul. He put his hands on Saul, and immediately Saul could see again. And with that, Saul became a follower of Jesus. He became the very thing he had tried to hunt. And he immediately began telling people that Jesus is the Son of God, and he taught them about the mercy of God that he had received. And all who heard him were amazed. He then went by a new name, Paul, as he began preaching not just to the Jewish people, but to everyone. Despite many difficulties like being imprisoned, shipwrecked, and narrowly escaping death multiple times, Paul continued to preach about Jesus. Paul said that he would do everything he could to save people and help them know God. And that's just what he did in order to reach people who would otherwise be unreached. And many came to know Jesus because of what Paul said. Paul taught many in his day through his letters, but even more have come to learn more about Jesus through the letters of Paul that can be read even to this day.
Okay, so Paul, or Saul, his name originally was Saul, right? Jewish man who persecuted Christians, and he has this conversion experience on the road to Damascus, and he ends up becoming like the biggest evangelist, or like the biggest teacher and proponent, like someone who went and proclaimed the good news all over the place. And you can see, so the Bible, Acts, describes several different journeys that Paul goes on. And they're all sort of, the path is sort of highlighted here. So here's Jerusalem. This is where, Jesus spent a lot of his time, and all Jesus's original disciples were from like right in here. And Paul goes all over the place, teaching about Jesus and forming little churches all over the place. And his biggest journey is when he goes to Rome, and makes quite an impression there. So if you think about, we have books in the Bible like Corinthians and Thessalonians and Philippians. Those are all named after places. So like here's Philippi up here. Philippi is, so if you think of the Philippians, that book of the Bible is a letter to the Philippians. There's a couple different letters to the Thessalonians in Thessalonica. There's a couple different letters to the Corinthians in Corinth. Here's Ephesus. Think of Ephesians. So all those books of the Bible are letters written to these various churches that Paul founded. And today, there are Christians all over the world, partly because of what Paul started. Like, Paul was the original person that went all over the world, well, really all over this part of the world, teaching about Jesus. And now we have Christians all over the world. The whole like go therefore and make disciples of all nations has really kind of happened. The last thing I want to say is these are the books of the New Testament. So you've got the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Those are the stories of Jesus. Acts is like part 2 of Luke's gospel that tells these stories of the early church after Jesus's life on earth. And then all these books, Romans, 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, all the way through to Philemon, people have usually said those are letters written by Paul. So this much of the New Testament is actually just written by one person named Paul, who we just learned about. And then there's some other letters from other people. And then the final book of the Bible is Revelation, which is a book of prophecy. And one quick thing to note is that actually scholars now think that only these darker green ones are like the real Paul writing, and that these other ones they think were like copycats writing like Paul, like in the style of Paul, but probably not actually written by Paul. But still, Paul had a pretty big influence on the church in those earliest days. So that's my little lesson about Paul. We are going to talk a little bit more about the book of Acts and about Paul's life in our small groups.